Hello and welcome to another day on Cornwall Pocket Farm. My name is Jenny and today I'm bringing you along for my winemaking. This year I made wine out of my grapes. So this is the first year that I have made wine with just the grapes, you know, the way the proper winemakers do it. Because before now I've always taken some of the grapes and mixed it in with a different fruit from my garden and then sort of done it in more of a country wine sort of way. Not that this is any sort of award-winning vineyard type wine. This is just my homemade wine. But I thought I would bring you along because I've had a couple of comments here sort of asking me about my grapes, because when I made the bags, I had a video a little while ago, a few weeks ago, where I made bags to cover up my grapes as they were getting very ripe and the birds were starting to notice them. So I made these bags, and on that video I had a few comments where people saying, oh, what are you going to do with them? What are you going to do with them? So I thought, well, I'll bring you along for this process too. So I have to say I've got the window open, so hopefully you can't hear too much noise, but it is so warm here at the moment. It is really, really hot. And in my little room with my new lights, it gets really warm when just my body in this room with all the insulation, if I don't have the door or the window open or whatever, and the lights, it does tend to heat up a bit. So hopefully that noise is not going to interrupt our little chat. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring you along for the winemaking. Now, the wine needed to be made. All of a sudden, the birds were starting to really go at the bags and try and get at the grapes through the bags. So I thought, no, they're fully ripe. Now I need to harvest. So it was just a snap decision. And I thought, oh, quick, turn my camera on because I'm going to video this process. So what I've done is I've sort of done little snippets all the way along, because of course what happens is, making wine, you don't do it in one day, you know, you do one bit one day and then another bit another day, and on it goes for sort of, well, a year really. My wine is a year. So what I've done to make it a little bit more understandable, hopefully, fingers crossed, is I have taken you through the process from harvesting the grapes all the way through to sort of the first primary fermenter and its primary fermentation. And then what I've done is I have stopped with the grapes because they're now in their secondary fermenters and just sitting there, and they will sit there for a year now. What I did was I picked up last year's wine that I made, which was an elderberry wine, took the process from the secondary fermenter on through the bottling and to the final glass of wine, if you like. Now, in the editing process, because I've just been through all that footage and everything, I had about over 2 hours worth of footage. So clearly it wasn't all going to go in one video, because it is a process over quite a number of days. So what I've done is, you will have seen by now on this video. Anyway, I've split it into two. So let's get on with the video and I will show you how I make my wine, or one of my wines. This is obviously the wine with the grapes. I make other wines with other fruits. So I have made plum wine, apple wine, cucumber wine, don't go there. I've made elderberry wine, blackberry wine, blackberry and grape wine. You know, really I make wine out of anything I can lay my hands on. I have made grapefruit wine before. It's not quite a taste, but drinkable. Which isn't, I would say, what could be said of the cucumber wine. Well, we still have a few bottles of cucumber wine, and we are actually doing what people have done for many, many, many generations and centuries and what have you, I'm sure, is we actually make a mulled wine out of that. It's a white wine, but we found a recipe on the internet for mulled white wine, and it's actually very drinkable as mulled wine. But of course, we will be doing that in the winter, not in the summer when it's quite warm. I quite like a nice light rosé for this time of year. Anyway, chit chat, let's get on with the video and I'll show you what I did with my grapes this year. Okay, well, there's a lot of noise out here because there's somebody mowing the lawn and it's crazy, but I'm going to harvest my grapes because one of them was attacked even in the bags last night. So they're coming down, they're all really black and beautiful, so I'm going to harvest them. So I thought I'd bring you along and show you. I'll just show you a close-up of what they're looking like at the moment. Okay, so I've got my handy dandy ladder out, which I absolutely love. It is brilliant. I just have a bucket hung on the top, and then I just sort of snip off the bags of grapes. So hopefully you can see in there, they're mostly ripe. Last year I made wine grape out of unripe, well, slightly blushed grapes. So these ones I think will be fine. And I don't know if you can see up in the bags, some of the grapes are sort of starting to drop a little bit in some of those bags. So I think it's time to harvest. So I've done that end already, and I have so many more bags, and on they go, and on they go, and on they go. Basically running out of space in my bucket, so I'm actually putting them over here, and I shall take all the grapes off the stalks and everything and give them a rinse before I take them into the kitchen. So just bringing them over here. I've got to find more buckets to put them in there. There's lots. Okay, I think that's all of them now, unless I've missed any of the bags. I'll just have another scoot round just to have a little look if I can see any. But other than that, now on to the next stage. Okay, there we go. It's a large washing basket full of grapes. Whew, there's quite a lot there. I'll have to now strip them all, take them all out of the bag, strip them all, wash them. And then the plan is to basically boil them up in the kitchen. I like to, with my fruits, sort of boil them up before I make the wine. It sort of sterilizes them a little bit, and it also will sort of burst the grapes and allow me to sort of squash them more easily. So I basically boil them up to 80 degrees for 15 minutes and then put them in the primary fermenter. Okay, so the next job, of course, is to take all the grapes, take them out of the bags. First of all, I've got a bucket here for the bags, and then I'm going to wash them afterwards because some of them have been damaged and they've sort of stained the bags. So I'm going to put them over here and they'll get washed. The grapes I'm going to take off and put into this jam pan, and the stalks will go into this bucket. Now, I think anything that's all mushy, that's going to go in the bottom of here as well. So this will be my discard bucket, if you like. And then all of the good ones will just go in here, essentially. And then the chickens, of course, will get the damaged ones. They'll absolutely adore that. I think what I'll do is take them off the stalks first and then wash them. Actually, it might be better to wash them before I take the stalks off. What do you think? Because if I take them off the stalks, obviously then the grapes are sort of pierced, if you like. And then if I rinse them, I might lose some of the juice. What I need, of course, really is a water bucket so that I can rinse them in the water bucket before I take the grapes off. That's what I'll do, I think, because I don't want to be up and down and up and down. I want to be able to do my processing in this one spot. Okay, I'm going to try and make that happen, and I'll come back. Okay, come up with a cunning plan. Rather than using this black bucket behind me, which is actually a clean plastic bucket, rather than using this to put the nets in, the little net bags, I'm just throwing the net bags on the floor. And then I filled that with water, and now I can rinse before I take these off here. So, of course, first thing I'm going to do is just rinse these ones that I've put in first, and then I'll carry on. They're not particularly dirty because they've just been around and they've been rained on and all the rest of it, but there may be a bit of dust on them because it hasn't rained for a while, so I just want to give them a bit of a rinse, basically. It's going to involve a little bit of turning around and messing about, but hey, I just think of it as get fit, really. It's sort of my health regime, essentially, is just basically doing stuff around here on the farm. No gym membership required here. I mean, clearly when people do sort of professional vineyard stuff, they don't do it like this. But my operation isn't big enough for that sort of professional setup. I just do it in a sort of a slow, homemade sort of way. It's always a a learning curve every time you do something new. I just basically go with the flow and make up new techniques. I try and get more efficient. So that's a beautiful bunch of grapes, but there are some in the bottom. These ones are probably damaged in some way, I think. Well, you can sort of see what I'm doing, so I'll actually bring you back once I've done a whole bunch more of these, I think. You don't want to see me process an entire washing basket full of grapes. It'll be a very long video. Okay, so they're in the house now. I actually have two jam pans here, but they're not equal. So this jam pan is my old jam pan. This was the one that I used when I had just an ordinary stove, if you like. When I came here and got this induction top, which is highly energy efficient, which is why we got it in this house, this old jam pan wouldn't work. So I had to buy a new jam pan that is induction capable, if you like. I don't know why, it's something to do with the metal in the pans. Anyway, I still have this jam pan and it's very, very useful for doing this type of processing work, but they're identical, which is interesting. So I've just brought you in a little bit closer so you can see. I've got two full pans, jam pans of grapes, which is brilliant, and they're all nicely ripe. There are a few that are not quite totally black, but most of them are really black and perfect. I think I caught them just really before the birds had tried to get at them at the top a little bit, so I'm really pleased that I picked them just now. It was the right time. And of course the mesh bags that I made, I'll put a link to that video here, those were invaluable, otherwise there's no way I would have got them to this stage. So what I'm going to do now, move this one off. I will heat this pan to 80 degrees for 15 minutes, and then after that I will put it into a mesh bag in my primary fermenter. Then I'll put these grapes out of this jam pan into that jam pan, do the same thing with the second batch, and then they'll all be in my primary fermenter. The next thing to do with it is actually to put a Camden tablet, or a few Camden tablets, the right amount for the quantity I have, in with the primary fermenter, and that would basically sort of kill off the bugs and the nasties and the things that I don't want. Then after that, I can then put the yeast in and start to brew the wine. Ooh, weighs a ton. Right, this one will go on my main simple ring. Put the light on so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'll need my glasses, but essentially I just have this jam thermometer. Where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? And again, as I showed you with my piccalilli, I'm using these stainless steel implements. So I have a potato masher, and I have a slotted spoon and an unslotted spoon and ladle, and all in the same design. But the key thing about this is they're stainless steel and they're made out of one piece. So there are no rivets, there's no places where things can get caught, so I can really sterilize them, and there's no yuck that sort of gets caught in rivets and that type of thing. So these are really brilliant. So what I'll do is bring this up to the heat, stir it around a little bit with this spoon, and then I'll sort of squash it with the potato masher. The idea is, of course, that I want to get as much juice out of as possible. I will put all the grapes, the skins, everything in my primary fermenter in a mesh bag, because it's the skins, the red skins, that actually give the wine the red colour. So as I'm squashing them with the potato masher, I can hear the grapes actually popping as they're releasing their juice. There are also a few stalks in here, but it doesn't really matter. It will be strained and squeezed through a mesh bag, and then that will be discarded. So the next thing to do is to actually sterilise this primary fermenter, as I keep saying. Sterilise this tub, and also a mesh bag which will go inside it. So it's a nice big mesh bag. It will basically hold it over there, and then the fruit will go in here, which means that when I need to take this fruit and the skins and everything out, it's really easy to take it out, and then I can squeeze it and take all the juice out from the mesh bag without having it all loose in here. So I have my sterilizer here, and literally it's just a teaspoon and some water, and then you basically rinse it around and slush it about and then leave it. So I'm going to do that now, and then really we're just waiting for that to cool down. Of course, the wine and the grapes has been sterilised by having it up at 80 degrees for 15 minutes. So now I'm just sterilising the bag and of course the inside of the fermenter as well. So this is what it looks like after it's been heated. And you can see now that all the grapes have basically sort of been crushed, or, you know, they've sort of just their skins floating in liquid now. So I'm just waiting for that to actually cool down, and then I'll put it in my primary fermenter. Now I'm a bit concerned that I'm not going to get it in the primary fermenter, because that is the size of the primary how many times am I going to say primary fermenter? That is the size of the tub it's going into. I have a whole extra jam pan full of grapes yet to go, and that is how much it's sunk once I have boiled it up. So my backup plan is that I'm going to get that liquid into that tub, my primary fermenter, and see how far up the side it goes. If I don't think I'm going to get that batch of grapes in as well, then I'm going to try and get those in my freezer. And then once the wine that's in there, actually goes into the secondary fermenters, which are basically these demijohns. So if you look down on the floor here, I've got some demijohns. It's red wine, so basically I cover it up so it doesn't lose the colour. Maggie, you're on film, sweetie. Are you smiling? No, she's asleep. So those are basically, there's a couple of demijohns of grape and blackberry, and then there's a couple of demijohns of elderberry down there, which I need to rack and actually bottle, to be perfectly honest. It's the next day now, and actually last night I did manage to get it all in the primary fermenter. When I was cooking it up, it's very difficult to estimate like what will go in a jam pan and what will go in this fermenter, and it's actually quite miraculous, because I could have sworn that the jam pan, well, it has the same diameter as the fermenter, so I thought, oh, okay, it'll be about the same depth. But when I put it in, it was only, I don't know, 4 inches up the fermenter, and it meant that I could get the other batch in as well. So I ended up taking the other grapes out of the freezer, putting it in the jam pan, heating it, crushing it again with a potato masher, and putting it in the fermenter. So obviously I did that last night, so I actually had to leave it overnight to cool down because it was really hot. It's quite warm here, so things are not cooling down that much, or that quickly, I should say. So I got it in the fermenter this morning, and then I added the Camden tablets. So this batch I added, I think it was 4 Camden tablets, because it's about 1 to 2 Camden tablets per 5 litres of fluid mixture, whatever you want to call it. There's probably a technical term. So if you know what the proper name is for that sort of melange of crushed fruit before it becomes wine, if you know what the technical term is for that, please put it in the comments below, because I'm always open to learn and I'd love to know. I could Google it, but hey, if you know, pop it in below. Anyway, so I'm just going to show you now what that looks like once it's all in. So here you can see that it's all now in the primary fermenter. But honestly, I mean, I've put the jam pan right next to the primary fermenter there. They've got pretty much the same diameter. Obviously the pan is narrower at the base, but I had 2 jam pans full of grapes. When it was boiled down, it was sort of a couple of inches sort of away from the top, but still, how did 2 of those go into that primary fermenter and only be that full? I don't get it. I think that primary fermenter is a bit magic. But there you go. 2 of them fit. So I'm very pleased with that, and we're all go now. Okay, so where were we? For you, of course, this is just literally like one short video. For me, it's days. Now, what I've done this morning is I have had all of my equipment and my hydrometer and my little sample jar, and I didn't bring you along for that because it's very complicated. I do a lot of head scratching and I have my little calculator out and I'm trying to work it all through. So essentially this is what I've come up with. So according to the hydrometer, I basically had a reading of 1.0615, roughly, on my hydrometer. It was actually really difficult to measure because there's so much fruit in there. It's actually quite a thick liquid. So I had to sort of tap it and wait for it to settle and do all sorts, but I think that's roughly the number. I was in the blue band, which is the band that you need it to, well, on my hydrometer, it's the band that I need it to be in to sort of start wine, if you like. When I did that sort of calculation, I have, where I'll put the instructions away now, haven't I? Yeah. But on the instructions, it basically tells me, and also on the hydrometer, how much sugar that works out to be. So according to that, I had 170 grams of sugar per litre, which gives me the potential of a 10% wine. Now, look, I'm telling you all this because this is the first time I've really gone into this seriously. Usually what I do is I bring all the fruit in, I follow a recipe. So here we go, here's a book with a recipe in. Usually I just follow the recipe. And if it's a slightly different amount, I double it, half it, whatever I need to do. But what I wanted to do this time was use this hydrometer that I have that I don't really use and sort of check the recipe because, I mean, I just do this, it works, but I thought I'd just get a bit more sophisticated about it this time. So that's what I was doing. So looking at this recipe, weirdly enough, not weirdly enough, it's a recipe. Interestingly enough, what I've discovered through all these calculations is that this recipe is about right. So I could have just followed this and it would have been fine. But anyway, I had 170 grams a litre, which gave me a potential of 10% alcohol in the wine. Now, this recipe asked me to add in sugar. Even though that when I looked at this and actually it was on the blue band, it was in the right area, I could start my wine at this, the recipe asked me to add sugar. So this recipe says to add in 226 grams of sugar per 9 kilograms of fruit. Well, I had 12 and a half, so I did some slight calculations and I thought, right, so that says about 300 grams of sugar to add. And when I worked it back on the hydrometer and everything, that would work because, of course, I've got in there probably about 9-10 litres of fluid. Anyway, maths, a lot of maths. You don't need to know that, apart from the fact that it worked out that this recipe was about right, so I've just followed the recipe in the end. But I know more now about how my hydrometer works, and I feel a lot more professional. Now I've actually sampled it and done whatever, but I'm just following the recipe. So I've done it a little bit differently than the recipe. I always have to. I like to do things a little differently and mix them up. But this says to take off the liquid off the what's in the fermenter and use that to dissolve the sugar in. But that's a lot of faff, and it's red, bright red, and it's going to be messy. And I thought, no, actually I could do with having a bit more anyway. So what I've decided to do is actually dissolve the sugar in water. So I've done that. I thought it'd be easier, and actually if there was a bit more water in the wine, that would be fine anyway. I may well, when I've taken the squozen out of the grapes and taken all the pulp out, I might add water at that point anyway. So I thought I might as well add water and do it this way. So I've put in a litre of water and I've put 300 grams of sugar in there, and I've boiled the water to dissolve the sugar. I'm now just waiting for it to cool down, and then once it's cooled down, I will add it to the primary fermenter, give it a bit of a stir, and then add the sachet of yeast. So yesterday I went down to our local shops. There's a place there where you can get bulk buy stuff, and they also have a whole load of brewing supplies. And they also have a whole load of brewing supplies. So I got some yeast, which was great. So I walked out. It was very hot yesterday. So Maggie and I went all the way down and then struggled all the way up, which was very, very warm. I mean, it's probably not warm compared to where other people live, but it was about 29 degrees yesterday, which is pretty much the warmest we ever get. And it was really heavy and humid, and we actually had a thunderstorm last night, which just cleared the air a little bit. But oh, it was a big walk. So, but I did get the yeast, which was great. So the yeast that I'm using, just so you know, it's a Mangrove Jack SN9. This is the yeast I use for everything, to be honest. To be honest, it's the only yeast they have, and it does the job. But it's great. It's general purpose. SN9 is a general purpose strain with a fairly neutral sensory impact and high alcohol tolerance. So whatever that means, it does mean that it works for pretty much everything. But what I find with this yeast is that it kicks off to like a massively mad fermentation. So you need room in the top of your primary fermenter because it just goes absolutely mad and there's bubbles and it's crazy. You can literally hear it fermenting. And it doesn't last very long. So this will go off crazily for like about a week, and then after that it really slows down, and the last bit is once you get it into the demijohns, it bloops a little bit, but it's much more controlled and it doesn't actually bloop for that long. So it's a good, it seems to work for me, so this is the one that I'm using. Okay, so now I just need to stir this. That's the chicken just laying an egg. Can you hear her? Don't know if the camera's picking that up. Anyway, the next thing I have to do, I'll try and talk over the top of her. The next thing I have to do now is just stir this twice a day for 6 days. So this is how the wine is after a few days. So lifting the lid, you can see that it's all sort of fruit at the top. And if you could smell it, oh my God, it's so yeasty and winey. And when I stir it, it goes really, really bubbly and all goes crazy. So it's got this is sort of midway. It's got another few days to sit on the actual grape skins to take the colour out, and then I will sort of squeeze the grape skins out and leave the juice. Okay, so as you can see, bubbling away madly in its primary fermenter. The next phase is actually after this rapid fermentation sort of slows down, which is about 6 days, I basically take the pulp out of it, squeeze the pulp out, and then put that wine into secondary fermenters, which are the gallon demijohns. And to do this, I actually had to bottle some of my other wine because I found I didn't have enough bungs and airlocks to actually put it in the demijohns that I had available. Anyway, you will see all that in the next video. But mental note, I must order some new airlocks and bungs for my demijohns because I'm too short, which was the problem. Anyway, so stay tuned for next week's video when you will see the rest of the process, in effect, making wine from the plant through to the glass of wine. You will see the whole process in the period of 2 short videos, or at least how I do it. I'm sure other people have many, many different ways of doing it, but essentially for me, I just find a recipe. I've got several really good books. One of them is called, well, the one that this recipe is out of is Drinking My Garden. And that's great because it's got so many sort of fruit and vegetables that you grow in your own garden and how to make them into wine. I have at least 3 or 4 other winemaking books, and also, of course, there are recipes on the internet as well. So never short of a recipe to make some wine. I usually get a few different recipes and do what works for me. And so far, in my whole life of making wine, I have to say there's probably only been 1 demijohn of wine that didn't work. Yeah, pretty certain. I tried making a raisin wine out of dried raisins, according to a recipe on the internet, and it really didn't work. No, it wasn't nice. It just didn't ferment. It wasn't wine, essentially. So that didn't work. Have I done anything else? No, I think everything else has been drinkable, but bear in mind, this is my level drinkable. So if you are a connoisseur of wine and you love like the best chateau, this, that and the other, perhaps home winemaking isn't for you. But for me, I like a nice glass of plonk, which is how I would describe my wine, and I really like it because it costs me next to nothing. I know exactly what's gone into it. I know the fruit and all the bits that's gone into it, and it doesn't have all the additives and chemicals and sprays and all the other things that are on and in bottled wine. So for me, I like this sort of wine, but I often think of it as an alcoholic drink, not a glass of wine. The other thing I find, to be honest, is that bought wine will often give me a headache. I mean, not even if I drink like a lot of it. I mean, if you drink a lot of any wine, you're going to get a headache. But luckily or unluckily, whichever way you want to look at it, I find that my homemade wine doesn't have that effect. I can have a few glasses of my homemade wine and I feel much better the day after, or even after having a few glasses. I don't get the headache and I don't seem to have those same after effects. So that might be just me. Anyway, thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful, interesting, informative, whatever. And please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Comment. I love to hear your perspective. Do you make wine? And if you make wine, what recipes do you make? What sort of wine do you like? I'd love to know, because I'd like to try some other wines, especially if you've tried them and you think they're really great. Do you have particular sort of wines that you make in your country? Is there something particular that's, I don't know, common, or any particular fruits that I wouldn't know about? Do let me know, because I'm so interested. Anyway, of course, did I say subscribe? Yes, subscribe if you haven't subscribed and all of that. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.